Merry Christmas everyone, I'm Bob Barry Ogle and this is the Sooner Sports Wrap. Today we are broadcasting in front of this big green thing, because it's too stinking cold to do it anywhere else. We are joined today by computer nerd and avid Texas hater, Steve Thomas, who has created a formula to predict the outcomes of all of the Big 12 bowls. Bob, the term that we prefer is computer analysts. Sorry. Computer analysts and avid Texas hater, Steve Thomas. Steve, tell us how the formula works. Well, Bob, it takes the on-field accomplishments of the teams playing, along with their strength of schedule, mixes in the intangibles, and produces an outcome. Well then, let's get started. Texas A&M takes on Georgia in the Independence Bowl on Monday. Break it down for us. The Aggies managed to beat Texas Tech by 22 points and lose to Kansas State by 48. That's tough to figure out. They have a defense that most junior high teams could score on. However, the Bulldogs suffered their fair share of blowout losses as well, but managed to end the season winning 3 of their final 4 games thanks in part to the timely placing Tennessee Tech on the back end of their schedule. A&M wasn't supposed to accomplish much this season, while Georgia had much higher expectations. Computer says that makes the game closer, but in the end the Bulldogs come out with a 31-30 win. Wednesday has Nebraska against Arizona in the Holiday Bowl. Nebraska would struggle scoring against a women's gymnastics team, but the good news for them is that the Pac-10 has dropped in the tank this year worse than President's approval ratings. This will be an ugly game marked by defensive scores, special teams and lots of turnovers. Computer says that the Huskers win 2-0 and no one stays awake through the entire game. 2-0? Computer doesn't lie, Bob. All right, Thursday's games feature 3 Big 12 teams. Let's talk about Missouri and Navy in the Texas Bowl. Doesn't Texas already have a big enough ego to have a bowl game named after it? Outside of illegal immigrants, outrageous oil prices and Dell computers, what does the state of Texas give us that deserves having a bowl named after it? Well, seriously, like just about everything else from that state, this is a bowl that blows right out the you-know-what. Think about this for just a second. Rangers and Astros suck and suck. Cowboys and Texans more sucking. Same with the Rockets and Mavericks. If Texas was a brand name, you'd find it on a shelf next to the off-brand crap like the Sam's Choice junk that Walmart puts out there. Which reminds me, who in their right mind would drink a Dr. Thunder over a Dr. Pepper? I'll tell you who would. A Texan, that's who. And then I'll tell you that it was the greatest soft drink ever. Have you ever been to Six Flags Over Texas? Suck City. The new Texas Stadium, $1 billion worth of suck. You can't even punt a football without some dude coming over the sound system warning you not to hit the oversized television screens. I'm sorry, are we there to watch TV or a live sporting event? Who would shell out serious coin and then go watch the game on a giant screen? I'll tell you who, a Texan. Steve, how about the ball game? Missouri can't stop Navy's triple option and Navy can't cover Missouri's wide receiver Denario Alexander. Computer says that Navy wins this game with ball control, 24-17. The Insight Bowl has Minnesota against Iowa State. Iowa State made the Insight Bowl? Who would have bet on that at the beginning of the season? A Texan? It was a rhetorical question, Bob. Oh, my bad. Go on. The Cyclones ended the season by dropping 3 of their final 4 games, while the Gophers finished 2-2 over their final 4 games thanks to that big 16-13 win over South Dakota State. Computer says that the Cyclones win 12-10. Oklahoma and Stanford in the Sun Bowl. Stanford has a running back who almost won the Heisman and Oklahoma has an offense that doesn't work away from Norman. Bob, do you know what's worse than not winning a bowl game in the last 4 years? What? Not winning one since 1996. This game is getting a lot of hype, but it won't be a pretty game at all. Computer says that the Sooners win on defense 16-13. Oklahoma State against Mississippi in the Cotton Bowl. Hang on a second, Bob. Let me check on something. Yep, it's been a month and O State still hasn't scored on OU. You know what they call them O State, right? Because the O stands for Oklahoma? No, because that's how many points they scored in Bedlam. Get it? Oh. All right, the world's most overrated offense goes up against the most overrated team in the SEC. This actually should be an entertaining game to watch, and I would expect it to come down to the wire. Computer says that the Pokes choke in the fourth and lose 31-27. Let's talk BCS now. Wait. What about Texas Tech in the Alamo Bowl? Don't want to talk about that? Bob, have you ever been to Lubbock? There are only about 10 people who know that Tech is playing in a bowl game. Let's move on. All right, Texas against Alabama in the BCS championship game. Have you ever seen a train wreck about to happen, and you know that it's going to be violent and disgusting, but you can't help but watch it? No. Well, me either, but that's what is about to happen to the Longhorns. You really feel that way? Yes, I do. Texas is the victim of a weak Big 12 conference and will be way out of its league in this game. Pasadena was once known as a place of triumph for Texas fans, but will now be known as a place of tragedy. Explain. Oklahoma and Nebraska were the only teams that Texas faced this season that had stout defenses. However, the one thing that these two teams also had in common is that neither one of them have anything that looks like an offense, Oklahoma because of injury and Nebraska because of retardation. On late nights, when I can't sleep, I pop in the tape of the OU-Nebraska game, and by the fourth Landry Jones interception I'm sawing logs. Colt McCoy was a toy that the Nebraska defense played with for 60 minutes in the Big 12 championship game. The Husker defensive line had more access to him than his own mama did at Thanksgiving. They tossed, bent and pushed him like the school bully does to the poor sap who doesn't give up his milk money. McCoy was sacked 9 times in that game. 9 times. Do you realize that before that game Baylor was the team that gave up the most sacks to Nebraska this year and their total was only 7? Even with all the offensive line troubles that Oklahoma had this year, the Sooners only gave up 2 sacks to Nebraska. Yeah, but Alabama won't have Sue playing for them. No, they won't, but Terrence Cody isn't a slouch and the Bama defense is in the same category as Oklahoma and Nebraska. The difference is that the Tide can also move the ball on offense. Alabama averaged almost 32 points per game this season and had the second-best rushing attack in the SEC. That all spells doom for the Texas Longhorns. Computer says the Tide wins 412-2. 412-2? You've got to be kidding. I embellished a little bit. I don't think that Texas will score 2. Alright then, until next week we'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas, unless you're a Texan. Then we'd just like to give you one of these.